The CEO murder is a crisis that will not go to waste. Will the country of Georgia be the next Ukraine? And a judge says DEI must DIE. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. I am going to start the show with a couple of things that follow on from last show. One is I got this dog. So I got this rescue dog, and I think I might have mentioned upon, looking at all his medical records, he needs to be handled with care for a while. So this is my first show with the new dog, whom I am going to name Arturo because he's kind of smoky black and has a little bit of tobacco fur on his haunches. But the shelter gave him the name, or the rescue gave him the name Carter. So I might have to call him Carturo for a while because I don't want him to feel really alienated in this household. But he's going to be fine. But if he interrupts the show, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what. I can't leave the house. I'm not going to leave the house for 3 days trying to keep this guy feeling secure. So if he comes around, I can show you him. He's around here somewhere. Anyway, so thanks for that. I also wanted to thank our good friend of the show here in every show, Stuart. You might have heard of him because when I don't think I told this story last show, but I probably told it once on the air. After my mother died on a Thursday, a week after her birthday. And on that Saturday, 2 days later, Stuart wrote to me and he said, I was at the farm. I'm always on the farm on Thursdays. And I sensed your mother. I felt like something was going on with your mom. And I said, he wrote, but usually that only happens when something's bad. I know you said your mother's birthday was on Thursday. Maybe it was that. Her birthday was on Thursday, but it was the day she died that Stuart had this feeling. And this is the really super freaky part. At that moment, basically, it was 2:00 on Thursday afternoon. They'd taken my mother away, her body away, and everybody else left. And my brother and I were in the house. You might know of him. George is the friendly truck driver. So he said, let's pray. I said, okay. We were praying the whole time anyway. So he prays on her. He's crazy. He's 70 something, prays on his knees. So I was so surprised by what he prayed for. He said, Ma, if you went straight to heaven, send us a sign. We'll take any sign. And I said, okay, whatever. That's of all the things, of course you went straight to heaven, and you're going to make her do a backflip. That's not her thing. She would always tell you, I don't go for that stuff. Your father loved the miracles and everything, but I don't need that. So she's the last person who's going to make it easy for you anyway. But it was at that moment that Stuart got some kind of, interdimensional experience with my mom. And what was nice about it was that he told the community, I have a huge propaganda report community and just really connections that will not die, and podcasts have been spawned from it. So he shared this, and then people could pray for her and to her and everything. It was very supportive for me, but I wasn't going to be hey guys, my mom died, pray for me. So she just went directly. And that was awesome. So Stuart and I have a special bond, and he knows how much my son is tortured by psoriasis. This is my son who has Down syndrome. And when I came home from my vacation, my Thanksgiving break, there was a package waiting for me from Stuart with some soap in it. It's an oatmeal soap. It's oatmeal and something else. I immediately gave it to my son. So I'm not sure what the other ingredient was, but I know that the oatmeal is something that my grandfather, who was a really cheap Irishman, had every home remedy under the sun. He swore by it. It cures burns, stuff like that. So I know oatmeal is definitely the way to go. So it's honey. I think it might be the honey oat one. So I wanted to tell, so I'm going to thank you, Stuart, for that. And when I mentioned that I would, or last show, I said, I'm going to say a little thank you to Stuart. He I guess he and his friend are making the soap. So the place is called Nikki's Naturals, NIKKISNATURALS.com. Nikki's Naturals. Very important that you get that just right. And he set up a promo code. So you can check it out for Christmas presents if you want. Monica, capital M. And it's a discount code. I will tell you if we make progress on the psoriasis with that. I can tell you right now, I just started a new program and I was going to share this with you anyway for anyone who is suffering from psoriasis. I took a picture of the machine because we also just started getting laser treatment for the psoriasis. And I mean, in one visit, it's made a difference. So I wanted to share people. It's some kind of laser. It's called the X-Track, XTRAC. XTRAC. And I think this is the miracle I've been waiting for. So just little public service announcements. And this is a crazy day for me because I have not had my head in the news today or yesterday because of this crazy Cartaro dog. He's okay though. But there are a few things I wanted to talk about. And then I have what I think is going to be a real treat at the end of the show. So we'll see what you think. If you like it, you can stick around for it. If you don't like it, you can keep walking. All right. So here is the big story. My husband says to me last night, did you hear about that United Healthcare CEO who got shot on the street and killed in New York? And I hadn't followed the news at all. Like I couldn't even put the radio on because I was driving the dog and I was worried and I just had classical music on. And so I was like, no, wow. And then he starts telling me the story and like, you know me, 40 seconds into it, I'm like, I don't think the guy didn't get killed. But I said, look, if this is a jealous husband or if he was like super corrupt and this was that kind of a hit, okay. But if this goes to policy, I'm going to either, I don't know what's really going on. I think, one of my working theories that kind of combines everything is that this guy was hit for a good reason. And I believe one of my tweets, I'm not going to name because it's just was speculative. Not sure he want to be associated with just pure speculation, but said he was about to testify in something, probably this insider trading thing. There were a few scandals related to United Healthcare, nothing super huge, but that he was going to testify. And maybe it was much bigger than him and they wanted to rub him out. So, but my tweet said, well, no, it looks like this guy seriously had an issue about health coverage. And I was like, well, if you wanted to rub the guy out, what better way to incorporate that into a PSYOP that could affect healthcare, the healthcare policy? I mean, we are always marching towards single payer healthcare. Obamacare was a great gimme to the bankers. I mean, health insurance, this is a health insurance company. That is a financial product. That's not a health product. It's a financial product. And that, therefore, it's just pure profit. Like it seems to me the things that are tax deductible, that are mandated, stuff like that are interest on your mortgage, your health insurance, not a doctor's bill, not the principal of your house, not the rent on your house, just the financial products. They're subsidized by tax deductions. So there's always something going on with those kind of businesses. And so I think Obamacare was there to enrich them because they mandated health insurance coverage. Now, the government also provides health insurance coverage now. So like, I'm not sure how it actually shook out, but ultimately the government wants to provide all, people who like big government, the people who benefit from it. There's movement in the intellectual worlds, whatever, that's on the agenda, single payer healthcare. So this already, every article you read, so this was 24 hours ago, every article you'll read has some agenda item in it. And one of the agenda items is, it'll call attention to the problems with healthcare payout and all that. And apparently people have been really viciously insensitive on Twitter, like, screw him. I'm sure his like ambulance wasn't covered, blah, blah, blah. Healthcare, I actually have a link in the show notes, which you can get at MonicaPerezShow.com, that healthcare is, I mean, just guessing, it's the most highly regulated industry in the world. Health insurance, actually health insurance. It's regulated at the federal level, at the state level. You're not allowed to freely trade it across state lines, which to me is one of the very, very few things that legitimately could violate the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, even though 99% of the stuff that is covered by it supposedly shouldn't be. This should be. So for me, the biggest problems we have right now with all of it is the way healthcare is regulated. But that being said, this guy, it probably has very little to do with the parameters under which they operate. And you have to make a bottom line somewhere. There has to be a clearing point at which you can make a profit or not a loss. And in a totally deregulated environment, that's very low. So a whole bunch of other insurers would come into the market and push the profits down. So there wouldn't be much profitability. So I don't know how profitable or unprofitable it is because it is such a controlled environment. But I would say for me, it's like higher education. The problem, so I don't feel this way about every single industry. I don't think any deregulation is good deregulation. Ultimately, yes. But some of the stuff, you're looking for trouble to just deregulate things that we've lost the thread of how to be responsible. So I just feel like some things are like deregulation has been weaponized in some respects. But with something like this, healthcare, where really the only reason you would need health insurance is if there's a catastrophic problem. So the one insurance that you should ever want is you take people who are exactly like you in risk. So someone your exact age with your exact health profile in the same region as you. And there's going to be like a million people like that as far as this a risk pool is concerned. And then all you want is insurance to cover whether you are the one who gets that serious illness. So if 1,000 people are going to get that serious illness and you have 100,000 people insured, then each one of those people is going to get $100. So they can pay in $1 and get 100 if they have the problem. And you can multiply that by, a million. If you pay in $10, you would get 1,000. If you pay $100, you would get $10,000. So that's how it works. And insurance companies can function that way because they make interest on those premiums that you pay. It's been so distorted by the regulatory system that you can't even get that. That's why it's incredibly expensive and you have to beg to get covered. Pay your own doctor bills. It's like car maintenance or taking your dog to the vet. You just pay what it costs. That's what it costs. It's only those catastrophes that would bankrupt you that you really need to have insurance, and you're not allowed to do that. Obamacare made it not permitted. You have to have all this other stuff. And it really distorts how they deliver insurance. And then they do whatever they can do to make a profit. So the website I found is just, like, it's like basically a textbook, you can read it yourself. But I'm just saying from a point of principles, I don't blame this guy. Now, it's so obviously has psyop features to it. I don't think the guy's not dead. There's no reason to think that. And I can't imagine how he wasn't the actual head of United Healthcare, but he's the head of the health division. I do think it's weird when, the shocked loved one, his wife, immediately came out and said something that set the narrative in motion, which is, maybe it was a coverage issue. I would not be able to sleep for days. I speak for days. I couldn't speak for days when my baby had Down syndrome. When my baby was born and they told me he had Down syndrome, I was like, couldn't get dressed. I couldn't do anything. I've seen shocking deaths before. I can't imagine someone having the wherewithal to make a statement of any kind. But I'm not saying that didn't happen. It was a very short thing. So that's a little weird. But they did glom onto the narrative right away. And what I did think was weird was the gunman, I guess, dropped some bullets. And on those bullets were Sharpie written catchwords for deny, like denied coverage. I'm not reading it. So, okay, defend, and deposed. So he was actually set to be deposed. But the real expression is delay, deny, defend, I think. I think maybe there's a book by that title. So it's similar, but it has that word depose. So there's like all these weird elements in there. He dropped his phone in an alley, so obviously they're going to catch him. He arrived 5 minutes before this guy at like 6:45 in the morning. Like that seems like some kind of foreknowledge. At first they said he sped off on an e-bike. I don't know why they put in that, trendy thing. And then e-bike said no, that he definitely didn't take it back. And they did. So, so what did the wife say? He had received threats in the past, and I believe that, citing lack of coverage as a possible reason for the threats. So that's what she said. But he actually, so there were some good things and some bad things about this guy or whatever. There in 2021, he was criticized for a change where he was going to deny payment for non-critical visits to the hospital emergency rooms. I wouldn't be surprised if he was under pressure to do that because the emergency rooms get so crowded by people like on welfare and uncovered people, illegal immigrants and all that. They just go to the emergency room. And that was a crisis for a while. I don't know if it still is, but it could have been that was part of an actual, response to a problem and was not a bad policy. But they delayed the policy rollout because of pushback from the American Hospital Association, because that's what they don't want you to stop covering that. But then 2 years later, he announced that United Healthcare was shifting to a value-based care model by paying doctors and other caregivers to keep patients healthy rather than focusing on treating them when they get sick. That alone probably gets you killed. That is not what it's all about, buddy. You're in the healthcare industry. Are you kidding me? So, but the deposition issue would have been probably related to this. A lawsuit was filed against Thompson in May 2024. So not that long ago, for alleged fraud and insider trading due to failing to disclose an antitrust investigation into the company by the Department of Justice and by selling stock options before the probe was made public. I mean, I could see that going either way, honestly. Okay, so So the agenda items just roll right out. As one of the nation's largest health insurers covering more than 50 million people, United Healthcare has battled a range of complaints and investigations from patients, doctors, and lawmakers for its denial of medical claims. Those practices may face, this is already in the newspaper, those practices may face new scrutiny after law enforcement officials said that the bullet casings found at the site of the killing appeared to have messages and deny, delay, etc. So they're already saying that they're going to change the way they treat medical claims. And of course, you would never, ever, ever capitulate to a murderer or a hostage taker. Don't encourage that. This is how they want you to think you get things done. That's why this seems like, whatever. Whatever. I don't know, but there are obviously agenda items at work post facto or ex ante facto. I don't know. Either in place before this happened or quickly ginned up after. So they found the guy, or they found the hostel on the Upper West Side where he was staying, and this happened in Midtown. That's why I thought it was weird that he was there 5 minutes before the guy arrived. Like, how did he know? If he was there 2 hours before the guy arrived, so it speaks a little bit of foreknowledge of this guy's movement. So I would think he'd just be watching him in his hotel or something. A couple of other funny little agenda items they put in here. They're trying to figure out the timeline. He went to a Starbucks, but he used cash, so it can't be traced. See, cash kills. Yeah. And the other thing that kills are silencers. So they're shocked. They cannot believe there was a silencer used. There's 5 million silencers in the country. We have to do something about this. Let's see if I had any other. Oh, the biggest thing, actually, this is the absolute biggest thing that's happening as a response immediately is it says that not just healthcare, but all executives are immediately getting want more security and it's just so reflects the that trend in politics. I've been talking about that since for years. I mean, it started with using vulgarity on in the media in February 2016, and then over time, it's like they're gonna start throwing punches in the parliament or whatever, and then now we have like Mitch McConnell was harassed, Pelosi was harassed. You have was it the Slovenian prime minister with that weird, I'm going to say fake assassination attempt. And then here, so they're all about locking these guys down. And when you do that, you're going to separate. You're not going to have transparency or accountability anymore. You are going to have a kind of separation and opacity, and you're going to really you're going to be able to more and more have face jobs. You're going to be able to have the face jobs of the people who you want to look. So you see that with like Elon and the presidents and everything. They're really not the guys. They're just the beards, the face jobs. And I felt that with like the Me Too movement, having women in the boardrooms and stuff. They're just doing that for optics, but really it's a method of centralizing control behind the scenes. And it's funny because the DEI reaction, pushback, the pendulum swinging is really coming out in full. So the woke thing from transgender surgery on minors without their parents' consent, that like pushed people over the edge. I think that's kind of what got Trump elected, that kind of thing. But the woke DEI stuff also is experiencing a pushback. And a big part of that is this DEI is responsible for the Boeing crashes. So that was something that people were kind of memeing, and I don't believe that at all. I think it's incredibly scrupulously monitored. If anything, it would be outsourcing to third parties that and cross border and stuff that they probably didn't used to be able to do. But the DEI thing, I think that we were being set up for that. And as I was thinking about that, there was this article that came right across the screen today. Boeing, two things. Boeing, judge rejects Boeing guilty plea over DEI requirement. Decision says deal between plane maker and Justice Department placed inappropriate diversity considerations on monitor choice. So Boeing had a deal about some crashes that happened. I think they were real. They were out of this country. And I've heard before that American pilots are the absolute best. I actually think the Air Force kind of exists to produce commercial airplane pilots here. And that, because in the beginning they were saying things like it could have been pilot error and stuff. So those I think were real, whatever. And then it all started unraveling when that panel shot off the Alaska airline plane. Now that I think was complete fakery. So, but that's the thing that got Boeing back in trouble. And now they are back in court. They're trying to settle. They're trying to get a monitor. And I guess there's a federal rule, perhaps that Biden put in place about having diversity considerations in such a role. And the judge said, we don't want that. We want pure merit. We're going to have nothing but problems. But here's the thing. Here was the punchline of that, which I was surprised that it wasn't that. There was something else in there, which is, it is fair to say the government's attempt to ensure compliance has failed, the judge wrote, explaining why he believes the monitor should report to the court and not to the Justice Department. That's what we said about Chevron on Tuesday. They want the regulatory agencies to be less powerful, which is fine. That's a legislative function in the executive branch, so it shouldn't be there. But instead of going back to the legislative branch, they're now using the courts to police them, and here too. So it looks like they're trying to give the courts a lot more power, and there's very little control over the courts, especially the high court. We don't have really anything to do with that. And it looked like Justice Roberts really I think I think it's possible he was blackmailed to say that Obamacare was constitutional when it absolutely on its face was not. It was supposedly a tax bill that arose in the Senate. So it's absolutely unconstitutional. Anywho, so I thought that was kind of funny that they made it sound like DEI, but they're using it again to push things into the courts. And at the same time, just 1 hour ago, as I was about to go to air, University of Michigan will no longer require diversity statements in hiring decisions, yada, yada, yada. So this is definitely happening. I don't know all the agenda items at play for that, but uh, it I assume that all of this is that big reaction, that big pendulum swing that swept Trump into office and is going to empower him to once again use his personality, his charisma, his vitriol, even to get us to forget to check the Bill of Rights, to forget to check the Constitution. I mean, that's all I want. And he never talks about it. Operation Warp Speed and the emergency lockdown and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the Operation Warp Speed is beyond the scope of the Constitution. Emergency powers, okay, but there should be some evidence, some hearings and stuff. I mean, I didn't like it, and it empowered the governors to do a lot of stuff. I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm just saying, I want the rule of law. I want the rule of law, even if I don't believe in government at all. I believe in the rule of law. The rule of law being the law would be don't touch me or my stuff. And that I would argue, cover everything. I would absolutely argue that. And I have. But yeah, I just think all this stuff is building momentum. And then you'll also have the clashes. So you'll have all this. It'll sweep these technocrats into office, the Elon, the Vance, all that kind of stuff. Kash Patel, the people who proudly say we don't have to follow any kind of process. And then you'll get like the pro-Palestinian protests, which will perhaps swell with the people who are reacting to this. So there'll be a reaction to the reaction, yada, yada. Yeah, I think you get the pattern by now. Two other things I wanted to talk about. Syria. Syria is escalating. We're definitely behind that. And I heard the guy, I was listening to Fox headlines. I wasn't watching it. So the guy, a government guy, was saying we believe that Iran has been the largest exporter of terrorism since 1979. And I don't know if you guys are following along, but when I played those Shah of Iran clips, that I did a little digging in there, and it's in, like, there's a BBC documentary, a document, it's cited there, New York Times, all that we absolutely swapped out the Shah for the Ayatollah. So we're the ones who installed that government in 1979. So, but they live in silos. I was talking about that too. All right. Georgia, the country. Georgia elected I'm going to call it pro-Russian. It's definitely not pro-Western parliament. And they're about to have a presidential election. And I remember mentioning they had like a split government because the president was the Western leaning one. And the parliament is now not doing that. And they immediately said, we are putting on hold your efforts to put us into the European Union till 2028. And the president said, I'm not going to hold an election, just like Zelensky. I'm staying. Crazy. Like, these are our Democratic partners. And they're like, yeah, no, you're not. We're doing this. Anyway, there are all these protests there now where they're throwing fireworks, shooting fireworks at police, which, like, that's such an American, like, it's obviously, I mean, I would say it's very clearly a Western operation because it's the Westerners who, our CIA or whatever, who want Georgia not to go pro-Russian. But there's always been this talk about the fireworks and everything, and they're teaching you how to weaponize them. Not cool. And then, of course, they'll ban them, so it can't be weaponized. But so that I wanted to show you, because I think it's funny. So I was watching CNN. My son, you got to cut him some slack because he has Down syndrome. He watches CNN 10. So I'm like, that's okay. And funny enough, he's actually as better informed than most young men his age, really very well informed. He gets a little upset when I tell him a lot of it's propaganda, but it's pretty 30,000 feet. But they had an interview. So CNN was interviewing one of the protesters, a young, like she looked like a college student. Her English was perfect. Perfect. I mean, my guess is she's actually a journalist. Her English was absolutely perfect. And she said, we're protesting because it has been our dream for hundreds of years to join Europe. That has been the dream of Georgia. And my son said, well, then they should move it. And I want to show you why he said that. It's kind of funny. That's Georgia. And that's Europe. Yeah, I feel like if you drew a circle around France, you're Morocco. Is that Algeria? Algeria should be in Europe. It's just funny. Hundreds of years. So like they should just move into the Black Sea. I mean, Ukraine isn't obviously Europe either. I mean, this is all Eastern Europe, but really Ukraine is just Russia. There you go for a hot sports opinion based on a map. Sorry, don't want to like put things that you can actually see on screen there. But anyway, so I have a good article here from RT if you want to read it. Oh, there is one little thing that I thought was interesting. There's a piece, Adjara, Adjara. I should have left my map up. Snap. I closed it completely. That is a little piece. Snap. I'm going to get it back. Forget about it. I'm going to get it back. So there's a piece of land right next to Georgia that is called Adjara, and they're pretty independent. And in so being, they were kind of respected by Georgia and Russia. And they were, I think I got it. So for a while, let's put it up there. They were tough. There's a lot of stuff that was going on, yada, yada. But it's right here. Can you see my little thing right there? That little piece. So this is Russia. That's Russia. That's all Russia. For your listeners, there's a lot of Russia between Georgia and Ukraine. And then on the other side of Georgia is the Black Sea. So they are not in Europe. But this little piece of action there at Adjara used to be independent. It was, I guess, Russia kind of battled for it, whatever. And then we did a coup. I remember, I didn't understand it at the time, but I remember it. We took out Shevardnadze, I think was how you pronounce it, and put in Saakashvili. I'm probably not saying it right because I don't have it in front of me. But that guy was the guy who sent murderous Georgians into Ukraine, did the Maidan. He may even have burned down that building. Like those were Georgians. The snipers were Georgians, if I recall correctly, by their own admission. And so when he came in, he also told Adjara, like, you're part of Georgia now. And if you want to meet my friend George Bush, we're really, really good friends. He can explain it to you. I think that's how it worked. Well, Adjara, so now it's part of Georgia, and that's where all the Caspian Sea oil, all the oil from Central Asia, and that's big. Central Asia, that's why you have like the Uyghurs over here. The Uyghurs are a big deal. I have a book called Dollars for Terror, which was written before 9/11, and it explains that by Graham Fuller, Ruslan Tsarnaev's father-in-law, by the way, Tsarnaev's of the Boston Marathon fame. He was the CIA head of in Afghanistan, and he said we're going to get the radical Islamists to destabilize Russian oil in Central Asia the way we did it in the Middle East. So that stuff's important. And Central Asia, I believe, is like the rising oil, and Middle East maybe is declining, if that's correct. I remember reading that, but it's hard to sort out like the peak oil stuff. People deny it. And I don't know the right answer there. But so Ajara is something that is a very important port for oil. So I would think we would want it not so much for ourselves, but to deny it to the pro-Russian people. So again, just like Ukraine and Syria, oil and gas do play a role, I think. And then the only other thing I had, and then we're going to go to comments, and then I have what I think is going to be a great treat, but you decide. Gabriel, are you here? Oh my gosh, this is going to be so fun. My last thing is I've heard rumors that Biden is being encouraged to offer blanket preemptive pardons because Kash Patel is such a bad guy and he's going to run the FBI for vengeance. So he's going to issue, this is the theory, Biden's going to issue Fauci, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, anyone that might be a victim to a witch hunt, blanket preemptive pardons for anything they might have done. I actually almost want it so we can just see all the foam party pictures and like all the crazy stuff that these people are getting pardoned for, kiddie porn or whatever, like, I don't know what, but it could really be. I would actually go back and investigate all the Pizzagate stuff because I feel like that is absolutely signs of high crimes, high crimes. So anyway, let's chat a bit with the comments. Greetings. Honey oat. Oh, it's comfrey soap. Stuart, thank you. Honey oat comfrey, COMFREY soap. And that, thank you so much for the discount code. I love discount codes for Christmas. So I don't get paid. Nobody gives me money for ads or anything, except for like the Spotify, when you hear it on the podcast. Listen to those ads or join my Substack or something, because that's what pays the producer. But so you can get all these delicious soaps from Nikki's Naturals, NIKKISNATURALS.com, and use Monica as a promo code, discount code. Thank you, Stuart. There you go. Oh, I'll write it down. I'll write the website down here. Let me do it. This is bad. I'm really going off the rails here, but I'm going to do it. Okay, Stuart, tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. Broad daylight sends a message as far as the assassination goes. That's what James says. And, that's a good point. And he did it outside the meeting. So, yeah. And I never believe that amateurs can get away with, I think you could run up and shoot somebody. I do. That is for sure. For now, freedom has its benefits, though, and that's what part of my little treat for you is going to include. Yes, that this honey oat comfrey soap is good for a lot of skin conditions. Stuart's learning about it, and I believe it. All those things are. I myself have experienced the healing power of oats and oatmeal on your skin. It's fantastic. And also, I have a little tidbit from Grandpa Malarkey that I discovered this myself only to find out that he already knew it. If you have a wart, even a planter's wart, cut a piece of garlic in half and duct tape it to the wart, open side onto the thing for 24 hours. And it's much better than going to the doctor. Much. Oh, Brian wants to know how the pup is. Well, look, he's being so good. Let's see if he's even in here. Nope. I think he's in his little bed. So I have to train him to crate train because he goes bananas when someone comes to the door. But so look, we got through the show. Good boy. Oh, okay. Cat Duckness is saying that the wife of the slain CEO, Brian Thompson, did say she couldn't talk about it because she was so upset. Yeah, I thought this was legit. Like they took this guy out. I think the agenda items, they may have scrambled for that. They may have had him laid out already, but I feel like this is extremely high level just because it was immediately the narrative was crafted. Jack says so many angles they could take with this story: gun control, healthcare regulations, surveillance. I missed that one. Yes, broad daylight. That's what James was saying. Yes, Gabriel points out something I did see. United Healthcare has a leading 32% denial rate of insurance claims. The CEO bragged about it and apparently used an AI model with a serious failure rate as part of their process of denying claims. Let me ask you, Gabriel, is it the CEO of United Healthcare or this guy who's the CEO of the insurance department? And I assume it's this guy, but I just want to clarify that. Thank you for that. But I still believe that this is happening. I don't think that what happened is some guy got pissed off and murdered the CEO. I do not believe that. This was something bigger than that, whether it was a policy driven thing or or what, I don't know, but I do not believe that. Yes, the Euromaidan was in South Ossetia. Yes, I was gonna refresh my memory on all that. That's that Georgian guy. Caucasus ain't Europe. Too bad. They can stick to being Christians. I think Islam was who brought Islam in? Someone was telling me how Islam got there. I can't remember. Yes, Runaway Slav says, "We don't negotiate with terrorists. We cooperate." Uncle Sam. Yeah, both of my stories go for that. Like for them to say, "Oh, this guy murdered the CEO. We must capitulate to his demands." Or, uh, yeah, this we have to defend democracy by canceling elections in Georgia and Ukraine. Well, I'm so glad you're enjoying the show, Cindy. I appreciate it. Oh, yes, of course. This is the point I brought up on Tuesday that Quest Fanning is bringing up that the people, if they get blanket pardons, they cannot invoke the Fifth Amendment. They can be compelled to testify before Congress all that they know or stay in jail indefinitely for contempt of Congress. That is such a good point. Cindy thinks that Biden should give that away for Christmas as pardon blankets. So I guess you get your maybe like Jill can embroider onto the blanket like the things that you're like a word cloud, like child molestation and bribery and fraud, and then just some little things like tax evasion. So that would be cute. A pardon blanket. I like it. I really like it. I feel like someone who knows how to make memes has to do that for me right now. Yes, rather than James says, rather than give out turkeys, you should give out pardons. Oh, and Cindy chimes in with try comfrey tea for your son and eating raw honey. Yes, absolutely. The honey improves immune function. Absolutely. This was it. This runaway Slav is saying Turkics, not Turkish, leftover from the Mongols, brought Islam to Russia. Good thing the Tsar chose the better option. Booze being harem was one of many factors why Christianity was chosen. Booze being, you're going to have to tell me what that means. Jack says, Monica, Jill is too busy being a doctor. My producer says, don't laugh at the jokes before you read them to everybody. And I'm so hard. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to try harder. But I have to read them to know whether the people are talking to each other or people talking to me, and I have to read the whole thing because I need to be able to follow what they're saying. So it makes his job harder because for audio listeners, he has to cut out all the little pauses. Clown World says, "I thought they had to be charged for a crime to get a pardon." That's what I'm thinking. But Hunter was charged for many things, cleared of many things he was not yet charged. How about the France situation? Are you talking, Cat Duckness, about their government basically collapsing? Is that news? I thought that was just I thought that was like old news, so I skipped the headline. Feel free to give me a little thing and I'll read it. Oh, haram, halal, Islamic kosher rules. Interesting. James says it's a monopoly now. Just get your get out of jail free card. That's pretty fun. See, now that's the thing. That's where you're getting away from the rule of law. Now it's the rule of rulers. So haram is the opposite of halal, like not kosher. Although don't they have the same like no pork thing? I moved into this house and I had the bees, but they got a better job and they moved to like an avocado farm or something. I was very insulted. Good thing I still have the grapes. A monopoly on violence, a monopoly on justice, and see where it gets you. I would say that's Jack's comment. All right. So I have something. I'm probably going to need more water to wet my whistle for this one. So I remember we were talking about Carrie Mullis because he invented the PCR test, which was used to weaponize COVID, whatever. It was weaponized by Fauci, whom Carrie Mullis detested. He detested Fauci. And I remember Binkley telling me that Carrie Mullis's Nobel Prize speech was like all about how sad he was that his girlfriend broke up with him. And he thought it was like very sweet, but I never read it. But today, my son said, "Hey, did you ever read Carrie Mullis's Nobel speech?" And he sent it to me. And he said it was amazing because he said it talks about the girlfriend, but it talks about, because I had told him that, it talks about the importance of letting boys be boys, to run around and skin their knees and stuff like that. And if, my son was thinking like he spent so many years on video games and I used to try to stop, but once they're in lockdown, you can't really say, well, none of this. So he did okay. He's fine. But yeah, that's what everybody was doing. And that's what the way to connect with the other kids. And it was important in that way. We could talk about that separately, but he just said it brought a lot of stuff out that was very interesting to him. And he sent it to me. I didn't have time to read it in its entirety, and I actually didn't want to. I looked for it to see if I could find a clip, and I cannot find a clip of it. I could not find any recording of it anywhere. And I decided, it's kind of long, because the very first paragraph, which I read, was absolutely pulled from the pages of this book that we just started reading on Monday, Makers of the Modern Mind, which is going to be great. I realize now this guy's Catholic, so it's fine with me. But when he covers Luther, and I'm sure Calvin, it's definitely going to be from a Catholic perspective. But if you ask me, he's not. No, I didn't even recognize it really as Catholic because it feels kind of mild. But he has objective ideas of right or wrong, so it's a good listen. You can listen to it right now. It's on like YouTube and Substack and stuff, but you can listen to it on my audio feed on Saturday. Okay. So I'm going to read Carrie Mullis's Nobel lecture to you. And if you don't want to hear it, that's great, because this is the end of the show. There will be nothing else. And if you like it, that's great. It is the polymerase chain reaction. That is the name of his Nobel speech. Here he goes. And I will not do it justice because this guy had humor. He had joy. I'll play clips of him in future shows, but he was just fabulous. They absolutely had to do away with him, which he died in August 2019, shortly before the COVID thing, at the age of 75, of pneumonia, which is hard to believe because he was so on top of vitamin C and everything like that. So I don't believe it, but I will not do it justice, but I'm going to try. In 1944, Erwin Schrödinger, that did not start out well. In 1944, Erwin Schrödinger, stimulated intellectually by Max Delbruck, published a little book called What is Life? It was an inspiration to the first of the molecular biologists and has been, along with Delbruck himself, credited for directing the research during the next decade that solved the mystery of how like begat like. Max was awarded this prize, the Nobel, in 1969, and rejoicing in it, he also lamented that the work for which he was honored before all the peoples of the world was not something which he felt he could share with more than a handful. Samuel Beckett's contributions in literature, being honored at the same time, seemed to Max somehow universally accessible to anyone, but not his. In his lecture here, Max imagined his imprisonment in an ivory tower of science. The books of the great scientists, he said, are gathering dust on the shelves of learned libraries, and rightly so. The scientist addresses an infinitesimal audience of fellow composers. His message is not devoid of universality, but its universality is disembodied and anonymous. While the artist's communication is linked forever with its original form, that of the scientist is modified, amplified, fused with the ideas and results of others, and melts into the stream of knowledge and ideas which forms our culture. The scientist has in common with the artist only this: that he can find no better retreat from the world than his work, and also no stronger link with his world than his work. Well, I like to listen to the wisdom of Max Delbruck, like my other historical hero, Richard Feynman, who also passed through here. Max had a way of seeing directly into the core of things and clarifying it for the rest of us. But I am not convinced with Max that the joy of scientific creation must remain completely mysterious and unexplainable, locked away from all but a few esoterically informed colleagues. I lean toward Feynman in this matter. I think Feynman would have said, if you can understand it, you can explain it. I love that. That's what I think. If someone can't explain something to you, they don't really understand it, even the meaning of a word. So I'm going to try to explain how it was that I invented the polymerase chain reaction. There's a bit of it that will not easily translate into normal language. If that part weren't of some interest to more than a handful of people here, I would just leave it out. What I will do instead is let you know when we get to that, and also when we are done with it. Don't trouble yourself over it. It's esoteric and not crucial. I think you can understand what it felt like to invent PCR without following the details. In 1953, when Jim Watson and Francis Crick published The Structure of DNA, Schrodinger's little book and I were 8 years old. I was too young to notice that mankind had finally understood how it might be that like begat like. The book had been reprinted 3 times. I was living in Columbia, South Carolina, where no one noticed that we didn't have a copy. But my home was a few blocks away from an undeveloped wooded area with a creek, possums, raccoons, poisonous snakes, dragons, and a railroad track. We didn't need a copy. It was a wilderness for me and my brothers, an unknown and unregimented place to grow up. And if we got bored of the earth, we could descend into the network of storm drains under the city. We learned our way around that dark subterranean labyrinth. It always frightened us, and we always loved it. By the time Watson and Crick were being honored here in Stockholm in 1962, I had been designing rockets with my adolescent companions for 3 years. For fuel, we discovered that a mixture of potassium nitrate and sugar could be very carefully melted over a charcoal stove and poured into a metal tube in a particular way with remarkable results. The tube grew larger with our successive experiments until it was about 4 feet long. My mother, so I guess he kept using bigger and bigger tubes than the 4-foot tube full of what I guess is explosives. My mother grew more cautious, and often her head would appear out of an upstairs window, and she would say things that were not encouraging. The sugar was reluctantly furnished from her own kitchen, and the potassium nitrate we purchased from the local druggist. Back then in South Carolina, young boys seeking chemicals were not immediately suspect. We could even buy dynamite fuse from the hardware with no questions asked. This was good because we were spared from early extinction on one occasion when our rocket exploded on the launch pad by the very reliable, slowly burning dynamite fuses we could employ, coupled with our ability to run like the wind once the fuse had been lit. Our fuses were, in fact, much improved over those which Alfred Nobel must have used when he was frightening his own mother. In our last experiments before we became so interested in the maturing young women around us that we would not think deeply about rocket fuels for another 10 years, we blasted a frog a mile into the air and got him back alive. In another, we inadvertently frightened an airline pilot who was preparing to land a DC-3 at Columbia Airport. Our mistake. At Dreher High School, we were allowed free, unsupervised access to the chemistry lab. We spent many an afternoon there tinkering. No one got hurt and no lawsuits resulted. They wouldn't let us in there now. Today, we would be thought of as a menace to society. If I'm not mistaken, Alfred Nobel, for a time, was not allowed to practice his black art on Swedish soil. Sweden, of course, was then and still is a bit ahead of the United States in these matters. I never tired of tinkering in labs. During the summer breaks from Georgia Tech, Al Montgomery and I built an organic synthesis lab in an old chicken house on the edge of town, where we made research chemicals to sell. Most of them were noxious or either explosive. No one else wanted to make them. Somebody wanted them, so their production became our domain. We suffered no boredom and no boss. We made enough money to buy new equipment. Max Gergel, who ran Columbia Organic Chemicals Company and who was an unusually nice man, encouraged us and bought most of our products, which he resold. There were no government regulators to stifle our fledgling efforts, and it was a golden age, but we didn't notice it. We learned a lot of organic chemistry. By the time I left Georgia Tech for graduate school in biochemistry, and just by the way, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about heirloom knowledge. You grow into it. You do it with your friends. I think if you tried to just parachute into the stuff that they have on the shelves today, well, first of all, they wouldn't let you get them in the first place. But I just feel like you would have a more cautious world, but also a more daring world. And knowledge would be diffused among those kids who are now spending all their time plugged into video games. Their knowledge, their experience is highly controlled and monitored. These guys know how the world works. That's why I always had respect for the Eastern Ukrainians who said, look, we don't just send us weapons. We know how to use them. And, we'll leave that for another topic. Okay. By the time I left Georgia Tech for graduate school in biochemistry at the University of California at Berkeley, the genetic code had been solved. DNA did not yet interest me. I was excited by molecules. DNA before PCR was long and stringy, not really molecular at all. 6 years in the biochemistry department didn't change my mind about DNA, but 6 years of Berkeley changed my mind about almost everything else. I was in the laboratory of Joe Nylans, who provided his graduate students with a place to work and very few rules. I'm not even sure that Joe knew any rules except the high moral ground of social responsibility and tolerance. Not knowing that the department did have rules, I took astrophysics courses instead of molecular biology, which I figured I could learn from my molecular biologist friends. I published my first scientific paper in Nature in 1968. It was a sophomoric astrophysical hypothesis called The Cosmological Significance of Time Reversal. I think Nature is still embarrassed about publishing it, but it was immensely useful to me when it came time for my qualifying examination. The committee would decide whether or not I would be allowed to take a PhD without having taken molecular biology, and my paper in Nature helped them to justify a yes. In retrospect, the membership of that committee is intriguing. Okay. I'm going to probably divide this into two. Don Glazer. So when he gets to the stuff about like getting specific, I'm going to take a break and we'll finish it next time because we're at our hour mark. Don Glazer, who received this prize in physics in 1960 at age 34, would later be one of the founders of CETUS, CETUS Corporation, where I was working when I invented PCR. Henry Rappaport, who discovered psoralins, would be the scientific advisor to my department at CETUS and would co-author 2 patents with me. Alan Wilson, now sadly passed away, would be the first researcher outside of CETUS to employ PCR, and Dan Koshland would be the editor of Science when my first PCR paper was rejected from that journal, and also the editor when PCR was 3 years later proclaimed Molecule of the Year. I passed. None of us, I think, as we walked out of that room, had any conscious inkling of the way things would turn out among us. In Berkeley, it was a time of social upheaval, and Joe is the perfect mentor to see his people through it with grace. We laughed a lot over tea at 4 every afternoon around a teakwood table that Joe had brought home and oiled once a month. Our lab had an ambiance that was special. I decided to become a neurochemist. Joe is the master of microbial iron transport molecules. It wasn't done like that in most labs, where the heads of the lab would prefer that you help advance his career by elaborating on some of his work. Not so with Joe. As long as I wrote a thesis and got a degree, he didn't care what else I did. And I stayed in his lab happily, following my own curiosity, even if it carried me into music courses, for as long as Joe thought we could get away with it. The department was paying me a monthly stipend from the NIH, and eventually Joe knew I would have to leave. After 6 years, I headed east with a PhD and a confidence in my education. My wife of a few months went to Kansas to go to medical school, and I followed her there. That was in 1972. I made no professional plans that would work in Kansas, so I decided to become a writer. I discovered pretty quickly that I was far too young. I didn't know anything yet about tragedy, and my characters were flat. I didn't know how to describe a mean spirit in terms someone else could believe. So I had to get a job as a scientist. I found one at the medical school working with 2 pediatric cardiologists and a pathologist. It was a very fortunate accident. For one thing, pediatricians are always the nicest doctors. And for another thing, these doctors were very special. Leone Mattioli, whose wife could cook, Agostino Molteni, and Richard Zackheim. For 2 years, I did medical research, learning how to appreciate old world values from 2 Italians and a New York Jew, and learned human biology for the first time. And here's where I'll end. Marriage over, I returned to Berkeley, working for a time in a restaurant and then at the University of California at San Francisco, killing rats for their brains. I saw Max Delbrick talk, but I don't think I understood the significance of who he was, nor was I influenced to go into molecular biology by him. I was working on the enkephalins. By then, there was a seminar describing the synthesis and cloning of gene for somatostatin. That impressed me. For the first time, I realized that significant pieces of DNA could be synthesized chemically and that they were likely to be very exciting. I started studying DNA synthesis in the library, and I started looking for a job making DNA molecules. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. He then gets this job at CETUS, CETUS, which is where I will start again next time. I think it's about halfway through. And I think the stuff about his girlfriend, which should be pretty good, is yet to come. Anyway, so thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that little intellectual interlude. Yeah, he was super sweet. He did a lot of psychedelics. He's a very interesting character. His book, Dancing Naked in a Minefield, is probably great. Haven't read it yet, although I have 2 copies, and I'm going to get to that soon. But I'll read a little more of this speech next time we meet. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to bid you adieu right now.